Pakistan finds itself at the crossroads of faith and foreign policy. On one hand, US President Donald Trump's new West Asia Peace Plan, expanding the Abraham Accords, promises Islamabad a seat at the global diplomatic table. On the other, Pakistan's streets are once again flooded with protests over Gaza, led by the same hardline groups long accused of being tools of the deep state. As Washington pushes for peace and Pakistan's generals weigh recognition of Israel, the timing of these so-called Gaza protests seem more than coincidental. Are they a genuine outpouring of solidarity or a carefully orchestrated move to help Pakistan quietly back out of a deal with Trump? Hello and welcome. You're watching Statecraft with me, Geeta Mohan. Can Pakistan join the Abraham Accords? A question that seemed unthinkable once now lies at the center of a diplomatic storm. Barely weeks after Donald Trump unveiled his Gaza Peace Plan, Pakistan found itself listed among the Muslim nations backing the initiative. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif was photographed smiling with Trump, praising his plan for peace and even tweeting his support. But within days, Islamabad's streets were on fire, and leading the chaos was not the opposition, but a familiar army-linked force, the Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan. This is not the first time Pakistan's deep state has weaponized religion to rewrite geopolitics. But this time, the stakes are higher, because the prize is historic. The Abraham Accords, once seen as a US-Israel-Arab alignment, now holds a new goal: reshaping the Muslim world's relationship with Israel. For Trump, Pakistan's inclusion would have been a masterstroke. For Pakistan, it would have been a diplomatic earthquake. And yet, just as the world began imagining a new dawn in Pakistan-Israel ties, Gaza returned to Pakistani politics. The same slogans, the same outrage, the same street theater. Only this time, the timing was too perfect to ignore.
This time, I think what happened was that they just got drawn into the whole thing after that, the great, much discussed lunch at the White House. And probably one thing led to another. And before they knew where they were being asked to be, to be part of, they're giving a greater role in West Asia. You had the whole aspect of giving a nuclear umbrella to Saudi Arabia and perhaps other countries. And with that, recognize Israel. So that's the tag. And that is where it's not an easy thing for them to do now. It's not at all easy.
Days after Trump's press conference with Netanyahu, Pakistan's streets erupted. Tens of thousands of Tehreek-e-Labbaik supporters marched toward the US embassy in Islamabad in protest of Israel's actions in Gaza. But Gaza was quiet. The ceasefire was holding. Hostages had been released. Palestinians themselves were celebrating peace. The protests were not about Gaza. They were about Rawalpindi. Because behind the chaos, there was strategy. Pakistan's military establishment had been under quiet American pressure to join the Abraham Accords, according to some reports. And Trump's team, emboldened by his West Asia peace victories, wanted Islamabad on board. But Pakistan's generals know their street politics better than anyone else. To reject Washington outright would be costly. To ignite religious protests and then cite domestic instability as the reason for delay was far safer. That's exactly what unfolded. Massive protests across Pakistan sent an unmistakable signal. The country's domestic climate isn't ready for such a dramatic diplomatic leap. Ministers swiftly distanced themselves from Trump's claims, while the army, which had quietly supported the outreach, retreated behind a familiar refrain: national unity must come first. A clever diplomatic retreat disguised as chaos, a protest in the streets masking a backtrack in diplomacy, a tried and tested playbook in Pakistan's political theatre. To understand why, one must go back to 2017, to the rise of the TLP or Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan. What began as a fringe religious movement suddenly became the army's most convenient street weapon. The TLP rose to the limelight suddenly in 2017 during protests against the then Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. He had angered the army with intentions to repair relations with India. The issue split over even after Sharif was forced out. The group came pouring into the streets demanding a minor change in the wording of the Election Act 2017, which allegedly weakened the constitutional declaration of belief in the finality of Prophet Muhammad's prophethood. By 2025, the TLP is no longer fringe. It is the street face of Pakistan's deep state. Every time the generals need to apply pressure, whether on civilian governments or foreign allies, the TLP appears like clockwork. The group's current protests over Gaza are eerily similar to past performances. In 2020, they demanded the closure of the French embassy over cartoons of the Prophet. In 2022, they helped destabilize Imran Khan's government. Each time, their sudden rise coincided with shifts in Pakistan's foreign policy or internal military politics. This time, the script has changed. The target is Washington's plan for peace in West Asia. Because make no mistake, Pakistan's path to joining the Abraham Accords began months before the protests. Behind closed doors, meetings were taking place according to some reports. In September, Trump met Shehbaz Sharif and Pakistan's powerful army chief, Field Marshal Asim Munir. A follow-up meeting in Washington sealed a strategic mutual defense agreement between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, the clearest indication that Islamabad was aligning itself with Washington's revived West Asia strategy. Trump called Munir his favorite field marshal. But there was a catch. Washington's goodwill came with conditions. Joining the Abraham Accords meant normalizing ties with Israel, something Pakistan's military leadership may have accepted privately but dared not admit publicly. The backlash was immediate. The Jamaat-e-Islami called it treason. Parliament erupted in fury. Even cabinet members began denying that Pakistan had agreed to any such recognition. Within days, what had been hailed as a diplomatic breakthrough turned into political dynamite.
मैंने कैटेगोरिकली जो प्रेस ब्रीफिंग की फॉरेन ऑफिस में ट्यूसडे को मैंने ये क्लियर कर दिया कि ये जो 20 पॉइंट जो ट्रंप साहब ने जो पब्लिक की हैं ये हमारे नहीं हैं, ये मनोवन हमारे नहीं हैं। मैंने कहा कि इसमें कुछ चेंजेस की गई हैं जो हमारा ड्राफ्ट था, मेरे पास सारा रिकॉर्ड मौजूद है।
So the army turned to its most reliable political pressure valve, the TLP. Within 72 hours, its cadres were out in the streets. Over 100 policemen were injured, cars burned, shops shuttered. The message to Washington was clear: Pakistan is unstable, now is not the time. A classic deep state maneuver. Manufactured domestic instability, cited as a reason for diplomatic paralysis and buy time. Western media dutifully reported the unrest, amplifying the chaos, exactly the effect the Pakistani establishment wanted. But this time, the plan may have gone too far, because the Punjab police, long resentful of being used as scapegoats for military experiments, fought back. For the first time, the crackdown on TLP protesters became violent. Army's internal divisions were suddenly on display. This exposes a deeper fault line in Pakistan between an increasingly assertive civilian administration under Shehbaz Sharif and an establishment desperate to retain control over foreign policy. The Gaza protests, far from being spontaneous, were a smokescreen for this power struggle. Yet beneath the theatre, the question remains: can Pakistan actually afford to stay out of the Abraham Accords?
They've had a long history of using the Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan, and they use them against Nawaz Sharif. They've used it at various times. At times earlier also, the TLP had gone out of control on the issue of the cartoons, so-called cartoons on Prophet Muhammad, when the present leader, Saad Rizvi, his father was heading, Qadim Rizvi was heading the group. Anyone would analyze that why did suddenly the TLP start protesting on Gaza? Why these massive demonstrations at a time when Gaza peace is being negotiated? Which is what the Punjab police was asking them. He says, why are you protesting now? when everything is sorting itself out, you suddenly come out on the street. So it makes no sense. So clearly, someone wanted the TLP to come out on the streets and then say, look, there's this huge backlash, so we can't go ahead with this. But well, as with crowds and as with TLP before, it's backfired.
The reality is stark. Pakistan faces economic collapse, with foreign reserves hovering at historic lows. US aid and Saudi investment remain crucial lifelines. The Strategic Defense Agreement with Riyadh, signed just days before the Gaza protests, could unlock billions in joint projects. But that cooperation hinges on Islamabad aligning with the US-Saudi-Israel peace framework, which means rejecting Trump's plan isn't just about foreign policy, it's about Pakistan's survival. Trump's Gaza Peace Plan is not a conventional ceasefire agreement. It's a blueprint for a new regional order, one that sidelines Iran, contains Turkey, and integrates Israel into the Muslim world's economic framework. Pakistan's inclusion was symbolic, a nuclear-armed Muslim state legitimizing the new era. But Pakistan's ideological DNA resists such shifts. Since 1947, its founding identity has been tied to Islam and, by extension, the Palestinian cause. Every government, military or civilian, has used Palestine to rally domestic legitimacy. To suddenly embrace Israel would mean redefining national identity itself. And that's where extremism becomes a tool of convenience. For decades, Pakistan's military establishment has kept religious groups alive, from Jamaat-e-Islami to Lashkar-e-Taiba, to ensure ideological control over the population. The TLP is simply the latest iteration of this old playbook. But the world has changed. The Arab world has moved on. The UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco have normalized ties with Israel. Even Saudi Arabia is quietly preparing for recognition. The old slogans about Al-Quds al-Sharif are fading. Pakistan, however, remains trapped by its own rhetoric. Trump's team understood that. By naming Pakistan publicly as a participant in the Abraham Accords expansion, Washington forced Islamabad's hand: either join the peace order or explain to the world why it cannot. The response was predictable: orchestrate outrage, cite instability, and retreat behind religious optics. But there's irony here. Even as Pakistan burns Israeli flags, its military intelligence maintains quiet channels with Tel Aviv. The two countries have shared intelligence in the past as well, according to some reports. In 2005, their foreign ministers met publicly, and yet the Pakistani passport still reads valid for all countries except Israel. This contradiction lies at the heart of Pakistan's foreign policy: realism in private, ideology in public. The Gaza protests are just another performance to preserve that illusion. But illusions don't last forever. The same extremists that Islamabad fuels to manipulate public emotion are now threatening its stability. The TLP's mob politics, once useful, now risks spiraling out of control. Their attacks on minorities, lynchings, and open defiance of the police show how easily the monster turns on its master. Meanwhile, India and Israel continue to strengthen their strategic partnership in defense, intelligence, and technology. Every year, Pakistan delays, it widens the gap. Ironically, the very alliance Pakistan denounces could one day define the region's power balance. Pakistan's policymakers know this. Behind closed doors, many acknowledge that recognizing Israel is inevitable, particularly under Trump administration or maybe under a future US administration as well. But they want to do it on their own terms and on their own timeline. The Gaza protests buy them that time. But time is running out. The Arab world's patience with Pakistan's ideological ambiguity is wearing thin. For Saudi Arabia and the UAE, pragmatism now trumps pan-Islamic sentiment. They see Pakistan's protests as excuses, not principles. And for Washington, Pakistan's credibility is on the line. Trump's transactional style leaves little room for emotional politics. His message is simple: either sign up or sign out. For now, Islamabad has chosen to sign out, at least publicly. The protests give it a convenient alibi, but the price could be steep. Lost investment, strained ties, and growing isolation in a region that is rapidly transforming.
If this is the trajectory of US policy, which is to stabilize that whole region and to have Pakistan as a kind of nuclear guarantor for that region, which God knows how it's going to work. But the whole thing hinges on recognition of Israel. Without that the West Asia, these accords which they're coming in makes no sense. So yes, if that line of strategy goes through, then Pakistan will come under pressure again. And then let's see what happens. It's going to get very interesting. And also, Pakistan has this sense that Israel and India are very close, which we are. And they would probably like to do pretty much anything to spoil that. So that's another reason why they want to have relations with Israel. But at the same time, they know it's going to be very, very difficult to justify given the genocide in Gaza and the very strong public sentiments against this. So there is going to be a lot of trouble ahead.
The irony of Pakistan's situation cannot be missed. A country that dreams of leading the Muslim world is now being left behind by it. While others move toward peace and prosperity, Pakistan remains hostage to its own internal contradictions, torn between pragmatism and populism, faith and survival. Can Pakistan join the Abraham Accords? In theory, yes. In reality, not yet. Because before it can recognize Israel, Pakistan must first recognize its own political schizophrenia, a state built on ideology but surviving on realpolitik. The Gaza protests are not about Gaza. They are about control. They're about who defines Pakistan's foreign policy, the elected government or the unelected generals. And as long as street mobs can decide that question, Pakistan's diplomacy will remain trapped between symbolism and strategy. For now, the TLP sits in its camps at Muridke, its followers waving flags and chanting slogans about Gaza. The generals in Rawalpindi nod in satisfaction. Washington reads the headlines and takes note of the instability, and Pakistan once again escapes making a choice. But history has a way of closing in. The Abraham Accords are not going away. West Asia is moving on, and Pakistan, the country that could have been part of the peace, may soon find itself watching from the sidelines. In diplomacy, as in life, indecision is a decision, and Pakistan's decision to let extremists dictate its future may cost it more than it can afford. Trump's Abraham Accords offers legitimacy and relevance to Israel, not Gaza, not the people of Palestine. But Pakistan chose the comfort of chaos to ensure that they don't suffer domestic backlash. For Trump, it may be a diplomatic setback for now. For Pakistan, it could be a missed opportunity. The Gaza protests may fade, but one question will linger on. Will Pakistan keep using protests and terrorists to further their agenda? Thank you for watching Statecraft.